Our reality has been warped by our screens. You're watching Making Sense with Robbie? Let's get started. Over the last year, we've been locked in our homes. We've been looking at our screens. We've been working from home. Our kids have been working from home or doing school from home. Everything that used to be done in the real world has been sort of translated or converted into something that can be done on a computer, something that can be done online, something that can be done sort of digitally instead of in reality, in the physical form. And this has kind of created this sort of strange and unique and this different sort of perspective of things. And so now we're living our lives through screens instead of living them in the real world. I'm just thinking back to when I went to work. It's I would take the subway and I would read a book, and then I'd walk to work, and then I'd get to work and I'd do my job for 8 hours, and then I'd go home and I'd do that process again. And so there was this breaking up of the experience. There was this time where I was in the real world, where I was doing things that wasn't my job, but that was just part of my day. And it was, it was stressful, and it was it was more exhausting, but at least it was real, right? And that's sort of a thing. It's now everything is on the screen. I have to sit in this room all day to do my job, and I'm just looking at the screen. I'm looking at my computer, and maybe I look away at my phone, but it's just mostly looking at the screen, mostly staring in the camera or staring at the screen. And the whole aspect of work that kind of made it a little bit dynamic in the past is gone. And so now all we have is our screens. All we have is this reality that we see through our screens. And at the same time, when you're using your phone, when you're on your phone, everything is personalized. Everything is using algorithms that kind of creates this personalized experience for you. And so you're living in your own unique reality that's not necessarily the reality of everyone else. And that is good because it gives you what you want, it gives you entertainment, but it also sort of creates this experience of yours that's different from everyone else's, and it kind of creates this distance from people. And so while we're all maybe using our phones at the same time, we're becoming further and further apart, because personalization is stratifying our ideas to ourselves further and further apart. Like I was saying before, it's our reality is no longer the things or the stuff around us. Everything that we have to do now is through the computer. And so reality is on the screen, reality is on the internet. The problem with this is that whatever we see the most of, whatever we know the most of or hear the most of, that is what becomes our world. That is what becomes our reality. And so in the past, we would have random experiences, we'd have unexpected experiences. We'd see things that we hadn't seen before, but at least we'd be out in the world, right? At least I'd walk by some trees and I'd run into some strangers, and we would do things that were just sort of random and by chance. But now everything's scheduled, everything is regimented, everything is inside your home, everything is mediated through the screen. More and more, the reality, whatever it used to be before, is no longer what it is. And now it's all sort of through the screen. It's all mediated through devices. It's all digital. I don't know. I would say it feels a little bit dehumanizing. It feels it's not natural anymore. It feels it's not what it used to be, and it's more and more this new type of thing where we're looking at screens, we're looking at our phones instead of doing things in the real world, because we're not allowed to do things in the real world anymore. And I've kind of noticed for myself too that my way of thinking, my thinking is different. It's there's this idea where you walk through a doorway and it kind of changes your context, it changes your way of thinking. And so we're all stuck in our houses, and so we're all all of our thoughts are kind of conforming into this sort of house where we are, or the home where we are, the place where we spend the most time. That is shaping our kind of concept of reality. It's shaping our reality, and it's smaller than ever before. If I'm in my house, it's taking up, that's all of my perception is my house. But if I take, if I walk down the street and I look back, then my house is really tiny. When I walk down past there, I can't even see it anymore, right? And so there's this huge gigantic world out there, and we're more and more living within a really small, narrow piece of it that's personalized for us, that's sort of mediated through screens. And I'm sure we all realize that there's something wrong with just looking at our phones all the time. We probably realize that it's probably not good for us to look at our screens. We know that there's probably something better for us to be doing. I know lots of people like TV and watch TV, and it's just a thing to do, but in a way it kind of doesn't feel natural. It sort of feels there's something off with it. And so I think most people realize this. Most people feel that there's something a little bit strange about looking at a screen all day, and opposed to going out and doing stuff in the real world, interacting with people, sort of having random experiences, doing just random things just by chance. And that's changed, and it's hard to pretend that doesn't matter. And I think one solution to this is, to take a walk, to go outside and not look at your screen, get away from the screens, and give yourself a chance to sort of absorb the real world world, like be in the real world and be experiencing things. Because when we experience things in a different way, then we kind of have a different perspective. We have a different lens to look at things through. And so there's definitely benefits to getting outside and going for a walk and doing things in the real world instead of through the screens, which is whatever you see the most is what is real, like is what is your reality, right? So if you live in some country, then that's like your reality. That's your world. And that is what you think the world is like. It's just whatever you have the most of is what is real. And so like, that's why sometimes people will say, well, like, if you want to have a positive attitude, then you need to surround yourself with positive people and you have to watch positive things. And like, that's true. It's going to make a difference. What you see or what you experience the most is your reality. And that is the lens, or that is the perspective that you use to see things. While we are spending more time on our screens, like the reality or our reality is becoming more and more a thing of screens. It's becoming the ideas from screens. It's like less about like the things that actually happen around us, less about the things that are actually in our reality, and more about the stuff within the screen, more about the stuff online, more about the stuff that, you know, isn't actually real. And if you kind of think about it, it's like they're all like copies of copies of copies. Like you might see my face here, but like it's actually just a digital representation of my face shared through the internet, through information. Yeah, like you can actually see a person and you might feel like you're talking to them, or you might feel like you're interacting with them, but you're like actually not, right? Like it's just a representation, right? Like our reality is like a digital representation of the real world, because we spend most of our time looking at screens, we spend most of our time inside, and we don't really interact with the real world anymore. So we don't have that sort of balance that it used to give us before all of this stuff started. And obviously there's like good and bad to screens, right? Like never before have we been more connected, never before have we had access to information like we do right now. And that's a good thing. Like there's no doubt that that's beneficial, that's helpful for us, that like can improve things for our lives. But you have to admit, like something feels a little bit different, something feels a little bit off, something feels a little bit less natural now than it did before. And I think that's kind of a result of just having spent so much time in front of a screen. Because all of our interactions are this way, this is creating this sort of warped reality, this warped version, or this warped view of reality that we have. It's like we're no longer seeing the real world. We see the world through our screens. And like, while that sort of seems maybe like the same thing, I think that the difference is enormous and significant and very important. And kind of another thing related to this is like, if we're like seeking the truth, if we're trying to understand the world around us, like how do we know it, right? Like how do we know the world if we're not interacting with it? How do we know the reality of a situation if all that we know of is what we see through screens? And you could say, well, like you can't know the reality of things because you can't experience them anyways. And there's some truth to that, right? But like 99% of experience, or 99% of things that happen in the real world, and opposed to through screens. And so weird sort of perspective that we have and that we've kind of been forced into. And I think that it's really important that we think about this and remember this, because the reality of today is not the same as the reality of 2019, because, and a big part of it is because of our interaction with screens, because of all the time we spend looking at screens, and because of like sort of the power that the internet has gained over the last year or so. Yes, we are the same people sort of living the same lives, but like reality has shifted, reality has warped, and it's no longer the same world as we used to live in. And that's something that's really important to remember. And I think that like one way at least that we can do something about this is like just to get outside, go for a walk, don't look at your screen, avoid your screen for some time, like read a physical book. I read physical books all the time. That's my preference. And so I would suggest doing things like that. Just like anything you can do to like interact with things in the real world. Let me know what you think. Do you think that your perceptions of things has been warped over the last year through screens? That maybe reality has been warped by our screens? If you found this entertaining or you found it informative, click that like button. If you're curious about learning how to think about things, but you don't want to be told what to think about them, click that subscribe button, because that's what I'm here for.